Can we just look a little bit? Is that okay?
It's very okay.
Just for me to center. So.
Yeah.
I'm ready. Are you?
I am ready. Yeah, thank you. It was just nice actually as a center
Yes.
to let everything else sort of.
Yeah. My first question, I thought that's I think my most important question has to do with your look. There is something about your look that is very absorbing, very special. I don't know really how to say it. I think it's such an important tool you have. I don't think you've written about it. Maybe you have, I don't know. I didn't find it. But, I mean, are you aware of that look?
Well, I was going to say that in a way, that's my question to you. What you see, or because it isn't cultivated.
It's not cultivated.
It's not cultivated.
No.
It's natural, so.
You think you always had this look?
Well,
This
I don't
way
know
of
what
looking?
this look.
Okay,
so you
I'll
have
say
to tell me.
it is something. When you have this look, when you look, you really look, and you really feel contact, and you feel like a little tremor inside, like there's contact, like a heart-to-heart contact, and it goes through the eyes. That's how I feel it, and you have that very strongly. I mean,
yeah,
and I don't know, an open look, but it's not really captures it. It's like you're really seeing and looking and making contact through the eyes.
I don't know if I've always had it, but I think it's something that's just me and the psychotherapy context, or contact within the psychotherapy world or teaching. Allow it.
Yes, allow it.
Right?
It's not, you cannot always do that. Huh?
Right, whereas in more social interactions, if anything, you know, and if anything, I have learned to moderate it or to look away because I realize that for some people it actually makes them uncomfortable.
Yes.
So the learning has been to avert. That's been my learning.
Yes. I see. Yeah, people commented on it, you know. Sometimes I remember, like, when I showed your video to other people, and they would say, "What a strange lady," you know. There's something so strange, something so serious, so intense. What's this? But then they start to appreciate. But the first, like, this is strange. Oh, you know. Yeah. But I think it's a very important tool. But maybe it's simply that you are in tune and that transpires through the eyes.
Well, but again, it's sort of it is natural, but in that way, probably other things are natural too, but they're not necessarily for contact of the therapeutic interaction. And there is something about saying, I'm here, I am with you, I am interested in everything. And it's also concentration.
Yes.
Right? It's just concentration and taking everything in.
And mirroring also, I think.
And mirroring, and now that we know about mirror neurons, clearly, it's a wonderful conduit. I mean, mirror neurons are through the body, but
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my real. Sorry?
No, because I have got, and particularly, and in the APA the seriousness, which I often have, but not always, has something to do with the tension of the situation, you know.
You feel tense when you are...
In the AP video.
Oh, in the AP video itself.
That sort of was a little extra.
Yeah.
Right? Because it was like
no, I have
45 minutes. Let's get it done. I really just want to focus everything on making something happen again. It wasn't conscious.
Okay, so you think you might be more serious than you are, maybe.
Well, you see the tapes.
Yeah, indeed. You're more like almost lying down and relaxed. Yeah.
Some of it, so yeah.
That's true.
So there is that piece in that particular video. And somebody else said I showed, what was I? Oh yeah, because I did a presentation before the immersion course, and I showed the young woman, who was very concrete with a cloud.
Yeah.
And there too, I'm very serious up until finally clear some blue skies, and somebody else commented. So it made me think, and I mean, I think it's what we're talking about, and I think the seriousness, that wasn't a relaxed situation for me. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Let me see what...
What a strange lady.
What a strange lady, yeah.
Right, indeed.
Well, it is
it's not
different from
social.
normal.
That's right.
And it's not as social. Yeah. Therapy isn't social in that sense.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's a real contribution, this intense contact, which people shy away usually in society.
Right.
It's really a very good feeling, you know, to do that. And that's, I think, what you give to people, like, hey, this is wonderful.
Right.
And I can do this.
Right. And the gaze. So we started with the gaze.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. You said in the workshop you were going to tell something about the development of AEDP, and then that didn't really happen. So maybe that's an interesting point to start a little bit. Like, so where did it come from?
Yeah.
And
okay. And what?
I was thinking also about this thing you said the other day, like, we were joking about this is my revenge of the deprivation of attachment.
Right.
So, it's part of it.
That is part of it. But, you know, sort of the psychotherapy story is that I started my clinical program where I did my graduate clinical psychology training was very, very psychoanalytic. At the more extreme. It wasn't relational particularly. Well, it had two pieces. It had a pretty strict sort of psychoanalytic orientation, and it also had a developmental orientation. So, you know, there was always both sort of psychoanalytic developmental, but we had a couple of just purely developmental people. So there was a professor now that, you know, I'm talking to you in your European guy by the name of Gilbert Voya, who was a Piagetian. He wasn't a clinician. He sort of started to apply some Piaget. Anyway, but he was a Piagetian, and he taught child development. So the whole developmental piece of my graduate school education was very important, very, very important to me. But as a stance and as a tradition, clinically what we were taught was very, very psychoanalytic. And I was very grateful, particularly in retrospect, grateful for a very rigorous intellectual training. I think it's almost like the classics, like learning Latin and Greek. Even if you don't do anything with it, it sort of trains your mind.
You think you don't do anything with it? Or does
No, I said even if. No, I don't mean I don't do anything with it. But even if you don't, and you leave it behind, it's like a wonderful sort of training for one's mind, right? But I was always very uncomfortable with what didn't seem to make my colleagues uncomfortable. And one was that there was a sort of cavalier nature, or a cavalier attitude towards efficiency. As long as we're in the depths. So what if it takes 20 years? So what if the guy's family falls apart and his wife leaves him and his children, God knows, there's depth, and that's all.
That was disturbing.
But
that was disturbing.
That didn't seem particularly to sit well with me. And I think the pathologizing and that kind of interpretive stance that didn't really respect whatever the person was saying. Anyway, so those were sort of two things of discomfort. So when I started to hear of short-term dynamic, and I first read David Malin's work, and he was so lucid and such a beautiful writer. I'm giving you the long version. I can give you the short version.
Short would be better, I think.
Okay.
And
anyway.
Then I'll pick some things.
Fine, because I can tell a 15-minute story and I can tell a 3-minute. So anyway, to make a longer story shorter, then I got very interested in short-term dynamic. First Malin, and then Davenloom. Actually, I loved Malin's writing, hated Davenloom's writing, because it seemed to me so primitive and ridiculous. But then I went to see Davenloom at a workshop in person, and I still thought he was out of his mind. But the moment that he played videos, at the end of the day, I went up to him, I said, how do I train in this? Because it just blew my mind after psychoanalysis. In 2 hours, he did more than people did in 3 years. So,
remember what you saw in that video, or that you thought, this is it?
The case he calls The German Architect. That was the first one I ever saw. And this was a very, in the psychoanalytic world that I had grown up in, the man would have been called like a schizoid man, because he was very intellectual, he was contemptuous, but he had a little bit of quality of fragility. He stared at the ceiling, he made no eye contact, he was very philosophical, but and I just know that in my program, people would have taken 2 years to just build a relationship with him before even beginning to do any work or something like that. And Davenloom just went after him. He challenged and confronted him from the beginning. He challenged that he was disrespectful by putting his feet on the table. And they got into this very confrontational interaction right from the get-go. And by the end of the 2-hour session, oh my God, you had all this intense work on the man's current relationships, a bar scene where he hurt somebody or something like that. And then we went back to his hatred towards his father and, whatever else. And the beauty of the universe, literally. The guy's having a core state experience by the end, because his whole life has been revealed after this whole major confrontation. So yes, I remember it very well. Clearly, this was in 1984. That I must have seen that, or 83. So it's almost 30 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. Or like two months ago.
I'm looking for those moments. It's one of my, little markers. They're like, hey. And
that was a marker. Yeah.
Maybe another marker is when you decided to leave Davenloom.
That was more gradual. That was not a big thing. I mean, it wasn't a big moment or a huge betrayal or a massive. It was time. I mean, it was time.
Full.
Pardon?
Time full.
I had learned a lot. Maybe I would have learned more, but it had been such a crazy system of sort of submission and no academic freedom. I mean, all of the values that we have were suspended. And I sort of knew I was getting into that, so I didn't get as hurt as some of my colleagues did. I sort of saw him for the genius he was and just this whole medieval mentality.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't me. It was a weird way of learning. I had learned a lot. And I think then the discomfort of all of the things that had been suppressed. So it's time to move on.
This submission thing, that is something I really appreciate in your attitude. You're having, let's say, you bring other people in, into your trainings. You say where things come from, where you learned. That there are other ways of doing therapy that are wonderful as well. I think it's a very fantastic way of, it's a modest way of looking at things, and we stand on the shoulders of others, and
it's important to me.
Yeah, and maybe even more important after that one, that you saw that I don't want to do it this way, or was that already clear from the beginning?
I mean, I think it was clear, and I think, because much of training is that way. Davenport was extreme, really extreme. But that kind of authoritarian teaching is not unusual. I mean, with a lot more respect for academic things and so on and so forth. It's not taught insanely. That was Davenport's specialty. It was crazy. But that kind of territorial teaching, one way, authoritarian or authoritative teaching, psychoanalysis is the truth, or EMDR is the truth, or this is the truth, or...
And you are not the truth.
Pardon?
And you are not the truth.
And I was...
You are not the truth. That's
right.
What you're saying.
Right. You or anything else that you might think, or something like that. So I don't know, I think that maybe that's one of the things that I did always have somehow from really early in my training, and maybe even before that, before clinical training, just the sense of core truth and the ability, okay, I will learn this because this is important, but even if they think it's the truth, I know it isn't, but I am very happy to sort of suspend and do what I need to do to learn or to acquire this. But I don't think I ever fully joined in this kind of way and then felt terribly disappointed or betrayed. Like, for a while, I too think this is the truth and the only way. I think somewhere...
This is important. This
conscious or unconscious, but I think in some way a little bit of that, the good and bad of being a bit of an outsider to things. And
so your discoveries, so you come from all this training and you take in all these things, and then you start to work on your own, I suppose. I mean, AEDP didn't exist.
Right.
So when is AEDP born?
AEDP was born in the bathroom with Lee McCullough.
I want to hear that story.
What?
I want to hear that story.
Well, I had in the 90s, post-Davenport, I was working with a couple of colleagues who had all been through the Davenport training and were now bringing and doing sort of being with the patient and bringing in empathy and really working in one way or another together to get rid of the aggression and the rival, we're battling it out, and much more empathy based. And so that shift I was not alone with. And the person who was sort of, who had an institute out in New Jersey, Michael Alpert, I don't know if you've heard of him. Anyway,
vaguely, but
some people in the STDP world know his name. He's here in New York City. Anyway, so he was sort of the more a leader, but we were working together, but I was the one who started to write, and he called his approach AET, Accelerated Empathic Therapy, which I never liked, because I thought all therapies are empathic if they're any good. I mean, it's a weird thing to call something because you're not doing anything that's distinct. You're just like accelerated warm therapy. And I was doing all of this writing, and we had a conference, and Michael Alford presented, I presented, Lee presented, a couple of other people who were in that world at that time. And I felt very excluded. It's almost like my contributions were not seen, and everybody was sort of leader focused on this guy, Albert, who made his own contributions, but not all of them. And I think so I was in the bathroom with Lee McCullough, and I sort of started saying to her, to Lee, you read my writings, you know me, but why is it that it never... And I just started crying, and Lee was wonderful. And I think out of that moment of the ladies' room sometime in the 90s, she was very much of a facilitator, a transforming other, that I had to take ownership of what I was creating and to pay attention to who was supporting me and who was not, or dismissing, or stuff like that. So that's when AEDP was born, really. In that moment, when it became clear to me that even in terms of roles, this person was, had a certain kind of authority in the group, but that it was not about collaboration. It was, once again, asserting authority, even in the empathic world, and then I had to separate, because it wasn't going to happen there. So the separation took place at that moment. It took a year or two to put into action. And then truly from that moment forth, I really started to do my own stuff and started to working. AEDP became, took me to a year or whatever to find the name, that would do it justice. And that's when I started to do the bulk of the writing that came in the book in 2000.
Would like to know if there's like a moment in which you have like a crucial idea, like, okay, this is important. It's like this. When is there a moment when you feel, hey, this what I do or what I think or what I found is unique, is important, and I need to share this, I need to bring this out? That moment.
Well, I think it's more than a personal moment. It's an idea moment or a perception moment. Sure. So one perception moment when Core State was born, right, was, again, watching people's videotapes. It happened for me too, but I was watching, I don't know who, but the work of somebody, who had done a piece of emotional work with a very initially intellectualized patient. They do a piece like that German architect with that. Here was another one, intellectual at the beginning, emotional work. And the person is in some very calm, reflective state. So they're talking, they're not crying, they're not weeping, they're not raging,
And then what did you think when you saw that?
That there was no concept to capture the fact that this was profound and affective, and that it wasn't intellectual, because I thought, in the current system, this beautiful moment is in danger of being interpreted and destroyed as an intellectualized defense, right? Because the person's just talking.
And that's when you say this is emerging.
So this is different. This needs to, and I try, and again, I sort of raised that issue. People didn't recognize it. Nothing happened, but so that was one moment. So I have a lot of phenomenological moments.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I like. I think that's important to understand how things are born. Another, I think, unique aspect of your work is the meta processing.
Right.
Do you remember when you discovered that, or like, hey, this is important?
It was the same kind of thing. This was in my own work, right? Of just getting interested in patients being moved. And again, knowing that it wasn't sadness, it wasn't depression, it wasn't trauma, it wasn't fear, it was something else, but they were crying.
And then you said, what's happening?
And I said, what's happening? What are you feeling? And again, I got interested in it. I started asking more questions in session, went back, no words for it. Intuitive clinicians know about being moved. It's a human experience. But I think clinically, again, the same danger of here's this beautiful thing, and if you take it for grief, you do damage, or you miss an opportunity, or if you think that, the person's, they'll tell you they're happy, even though they're crying, you'll tell them they're in denial or something like that. I mean, I think that sense, that is very important to me, preserving the integrity of people's experience. And when you don't have concepts or accurate phenomenological descriptions, then you can make so many mistakes where you destroy something precious. So,
yeah, beautiful.
So that's important.
Something else I've understood, I'm sharing this with you, because I'm really trying to study what is here, like what is she do, and what's here, what I didn't know, because I know the intense emotional work, that's not new, but the way you do it and where you go with it. And one thing I also noticed is that if you have to talk about what's between you and me, it's a very powerful tool to have immediate attachment. And that's kind of surprising to me, because usually I was always thinking it more about in looking, hugging, being close. And the fact that when you put it into words is the moment that it really somehow hits space, and then you feel the emotion and something new happens. That was very powerful. I don't know if you can say something about that.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a little counterintuitive, because when you just describe it to people, people tend to think that the words are going to mess it up.
Yeah, exactly. It's like we'll become intellectual or something.
Intellectual or philosophical, whereas it's really the next level of deepening, because you really take a risk in the intimacy, because the looking and the hug or touch, they're profound in one way. They're profound, period. But that's intimacy in a shared way, in one way. But then each person is having his or her own subjective experience that you really don't know exactly. Like you don't know if the person feeling love or sadness or grief or, clearly they're touched and we're together or resonant in some way.
I also believe that when you have to put it into words, there's also a little bit of moment of creation.
Exactly.
It becomes clearer and it becomes really symbolized.
And it's the next place in you, and it's a little more vulnerable. Because now you're really telling the other person what you're really feeling. And it's the next level. And I think that's what's not realized, that in the communication, it's this huge, it's the moment of creation, which is always when you take experience, and attach a word to it from the inside, not some intellectual description,
exactly.
but like what's the word that's going to capture this accurately so it feels real for me, so it's creation, but it's risk. Because as long as you're nonverbal, there's still a little privacy.
Yeah. Is there anything else that comes to mind that you find particularly helpful to get closer? Or
what do you mean?
Well, in the same sense, you know, if you verbalize what's happening between us, that helps. If you look,
millions. Yeah.
Millions?
Yeah.
No, one or two would be nice. Just what you think is an important one.
I think the sense of being gotten, that sense of I get it. In other words, if you tell me something, and then I tell you something, look at, either verbally or non-verbally, respond in a way that your then experience is, she gets it. And it can be through words, it can be through emotion, it can be through, the vehicle depends, but I guess at some point language comes in. At some point.
It can be as simple as I know, or I heard you say that.
No, I think it's beyond that again.
Okay.
The specificity of words, it's just like you were saying. There's one thing to have contact, and then if you have contact and then you attach words to the contact, something deepens. Something else happens. The next thing happens.
Is there a next thing after that?
There's always the next thing. You can keep going, right? That's that transformational spiral. But with that, I think when you put it into words, because words have that specificity that the nonverbal stuff doesn't quite have. What was it I had this very interesting exchange with it. It was minor. It's not some huge emotional experience, but it sort of captured it. This patient was telling me something about what happened between her and her boyfriend. And he did something that she didn't like. She described the incident to me. I must have said 10 things about it that to me were all synonyms. Oh, so you didn't like it because you felt you were in it together and he really was standing outside of the interaction. Or you didn't like, and she said, yeah. Or you didn't like it because you felt this, but actually it turned out that he was that. Yeah. But then I said, but it wasn't. And then I said, so you felt monitored? She said, yes. I had expressed the idea that he was standing outside and judging her 7 different ways, and she always said that's right.
But it wasn't the real.
But the word monitored or scrutinized or whatever, but it was that word that she said yes. And then you had that drop down, right? So that's what words do, and it's monitored and not scrutinized, or it's monitored and not judged. They're all very equivalent, but every now and then you get that word that says yes. And I think that's what words can do. I think you're right, it probably can happen for just a look. And then something inside says yes, thank you.
Are there any clients or problems or that are difficult for you? Or, basically, what is difficult for you in therapy? You had a sister.
Yeah. I think what's personally difficult for me,
Yeah,
okay.
I guess
No, go ahead.
something
Tell
like
me
that.
a little more about what you have in mind.
it's basically it's a bit of two. It's one is like one is actually what is personally difficult. So what things do you find difficult to deal with? What kind of emotions or what kind of things that people do to you interpersonally or things you find difficult? And the question goes further, like where is the limit, almost theoretically, of what you can help with AEDP, what are the limits of AEDP, but it's a bit of both. But maybe we start with the first.
Well, I'll start with the second because it's easier.
Okay.
And it's not that related to the first. It may be related narrowly, but not broadly. You know, I think the first is that I'm such a trial and error person and such a believer in the dyad that I think there are always limits for a given individual or for a given dyad. Me and this person are just not doing it. Or you and that person, it's not happening.
It's not happening. Okay.
But it says nothing about this person with somebody else. I mean, it says a little something. Or maybe it says half or 60% of something. It's not nothing. But to my mind, there are no limits. So that, for instance, I don't work with psychotic patients. I haven't worked with psychotic patients since I was early in my training and so on and so forth. They're just not in my practice. So I would say, no, I don't think that AEDP is good for psychotic patients. I wouldn't apply it.
Yeah.
Now, there's several people in the AEDP community who are using it. And I'm sure making certain modifications or using this part but not this part, maybe. But in any case, I'm getting it and I'm getting wonderful, wonderful results. Or similarly with addictions or, you know.
Can we just go back to the previous point here, because I think it's just not working. It's possible that there's simply is not a good match.
That's it. You and he.
Now sometimes I also feel that that's part of the problem, because the person has difficulty making contact with everybody basically, but that's not what you're talking about. No, because I think, okay, so this is not working with me. How do you know that? I mean,
how do I know it's not working?
What's like the marker for, how do you distinguish between
difficult and not
difficulty
working
versus this is not a good match, there's no chemistry or whatever, but it is. No.
For instance, I'm working right now with a person who's really difficult, but we're really engaged. I don't know if she's going to be able to stay with the treatment. I don't know if I'm going to be able to find a way to get her to settle and stay and make it through. But we're engaged. But something really difficult is happening, and maybe I'm a little too intense and I should be a little more supportive, slower with her. Maybe she certainly has lots of difficulties with lots of people.
There's life in your...
But there's such life in it, you know, and she may drop out, but that's not a good outcome. But we're engaged.
Very difficult, but engaged.
Really difficult, and it might turn out poorly, right? We don't know. We'll see. This is a relatively new therapy, new case. But with other people, it just feels like something doesn't grip, like nothing that alive is happening for them. And frankly, nothing that alive is happening for me.
Yeah.
It just feels a little flat, or I don't love them, or I don't hate them either, but, you know, it's just like,
How much time would you need to notice that?
I don't know, because that's, you know, and then it changes. Let me try to think of some specifics, but
you notice it after a couple of sessions, or?
Well, I think I notice it immediately, but then I'll give it a couple of sessions
Still have
or
hope
try.
that something may change.
Oh, totally. I don't think.
Yeah, okay.
But you know, this guy came to me, and I came very highly recommended. Blah blah blah. It's Diana Fosha. Like, he came with all of this stuff, but he had had a previous meeting with, I don't know, an Alexander technique person or a massage therapist, somebody without very fancy credentials at all. But she had really connected with him, and he felt something happened in the meeting with her. And in his one consultation with me, I didn't like him that much.
And you thought there's something there.
And somehow we got on the psychopathology track rather than on the transformance track, because I guess I felt a little critical of him, or, you know, it ended up in that, and he didn't like what was happening with me that much, though he recognized that what we were talking about was accurate. He didn't feel that I hated him. You know, he didn't love the interaction, but he saw that there was value to it. And he felt conflicted because I was the fancy expert and that person didn't have credentials particularly. I advised him to go to her, and he felt so relieved. So that to me is
it's a beautiful intervention.
Yeah, because I knew we could struggle our way through it, but he had it with her, and he will have it for a while. So go for that.
Fancy therapist?
Yeah.
Yes. Let me see what I would like to ask. It was something which I felt during the workshop, you know. I mean, you're very easy to idealize. It's such a pleasant way, and it's I guess for many people completely new, and to be so close and they're like, wow, and there were all these hyperboles and then you said something very, very beautiful. I felt it was like, okay, I made my contribution, and I don't deny this, but there's also something that channels through me. I didn't really get it because you were far away. And I'd like to know a little bit more about that, how you see that, and how you deal with, you know, with these people who would like put you on a pedestal. Oh, this is it, and it's exactly what you told in the beginning of our interview. This is not what I like, or not what I believe in. So how do you do that?
I mean, I don't like it, so therefore I don't
feed it. Yes.
You know, I do think it's important for people to have those profound positive experiences in the context of a relationship with another. So I know it gets a little much, you know, in a big group like that, but I think they're very important. They're part of the work. I think they're very genuine, and that's okay. They don't go to my head that I am this unbelievable, extraordinary being. So, I don't know.
Maybe the channeling.
The channeling.
Yeah.
I mean, I have gifts, and they have to do with, you know, things that feel right, articulation. I can really put things into words. I've described, I have a very coherent, integrated mind, so it's allowed me to develop what I've developed, so yeah, I own that. But I think what people are so moved by is the transformational process. I think people are moved by human contact. I think people are moved by deep experience. And then they're moved and they give me the credit. And, it's, you know, I'm glad I've been able to contribute to access this stuff deeply and quickly, and in trainings and in 2 minutes of contact on the first, the eye contact on the first day of the course and all of that, but the fact that people are having these astonishing experiences when they're looking into each other's eyes, I'm not taking credit for that. But it goes to me because I'm facilitating it. So,
but it must be wonderful to be able to show people, look what you can
wonderful. Do. Yes, because I love that stuff, and that's the gratification that it's sharing and finding other people who love it as well. But that's the gift. That's the gift. And that's what I'm channeling with a fair amount of order and articulation and coherence and map and techniques and a whole sort of.
It's not some kind of magic thing.
It's
actually like a very biological, basic, innate resource that you like re-establish or put into work. Actually, that's what I thought a little bit. It's like it's something we lost. Clients say that very often, it's the thing that you gave me back, but I never had.
Self I never had, right.
But sometimes I also wonder if it's something that we lost in society, or it's something so natural, so simple. Basic, so simple, so true and deep, and it's really the essence of being social beings, what we all are. It somehow got lost or something. Can you relate to that? Or?
Yeah, but like for instance, sort of psychoanalysis, and it's such a profound contribution to deep understanding of unconscious forces and all of that. But it's gotten so disconnected from fundamental aspects of human experience. It's very distant, and it's very rich theory, but the theory's here, and you put this heavy theory on. And they're also, it's also the phenomena of healing as opposed to psychopathology is complicated, but health is not. Health is simple. Contact is simple. Feeling good is simple. Feeling bad is really complicated. To understand and how does it happen? It got to be this. Yeah. But this is easy. Right?
I was thinking about the phrase you said that you're an emotion junkie.
Yes.
Can you comment on that? What do you mean by that?
Well, that's, to my mind, where the aliveness is. And, it's few things. It's aliveness, it's contact, and then it's a way of accessing sort of deeper aspects of self. So it always leads somewhere, when it's adaptive, core, emotion, and also it takes me, it takes one, it takes the person feeling it, if it's...
And why are people scared of that? I feel a little scared about that.
Yeah. Well, this is sort of where I think I grew up. I mean, and again, maybe it's something fundamental about how I'm wired.
Yes.
That but I grew up in an environment, when emotion was so not part of the environment, the family environment, where either it was like, you're weak, or you're getting emotional, right? Said as an insult, or as a criticism or a judgment. You're getting emotional, like control yourself, get rational, be strong, don't be weak. That was my mother very much. My parents were sort of sex role stereotype reversed. So my mother was the tough one. My father was the sort of more hysterical, bipolar one. So he had emotion, but his emotions were so out of control some of the time. And for her, and that whole side of the family was all about control and
it's a kind of dramatic situation. situation. One telling you that it's not good, and the other one showing you that it's not so good.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how did you get out here?
Books.
Books?
Books.
Intellectual things?
Novels. I mean,
okay.
Novels were, I was a kid who read. So I think in novels I sort of found a resonance for this whole...
It's fantastic how people can create
amazing.
Parallel universes.
It's amazing.
It's what you told us about neighbors and grandparents.
Exactly.
And they go and find that resource because somehow they know that this is not okay, this is not...
That's right.
That's
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. What's happening here, like I have to stay here because I'm 5 years old or 8 or whatever, and I love my parents and this is my family. But, it's in the books that I found that resonance that I didn't find, in my sort of city. So,
Beautiful.
Right, so novels and emotion through, I never put that together till this moment, but that's what novels are, emotion through words, right? You convey emotion. You don't have a movie, you don't have a picture, you don't have people in there, you have words on a page.
Do you remember a book you read that was really important?
Oh, let's see, there was this French book that I read in both French and Romanian. It was called Seul au monde. Yeah, it's not a big classic.
Tell me about it.
Oh no, I don't want to tell you about it because I'll cry.
Really?
Yes.
It would still move you?
Totally. Totally.
Okay.
But
I find it amazing that the book must have been important to you.
It was that. There were several like that, sort of, between 6 and 10. That I guess had some core truth for me because they made me cry and I loved them.
And they comfort you, and then you cried silently, hiddenly
with
your books.
Right. Having healing affects and deep grief and a whole bit as a little 10-year-old.
Core affect, maybe?
Core affect and core state, both probably, but a lot of core affect through the books. And that was okay. I don't think anybody gave me a hard time about crying when reading, but I probably did it privately too. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter. So.
Okay. Where are we in terms of time?
Oh my goodness, we should stop.
Is that so?
Yeah, 10:15.
Okay.
We should bring it to an end. So
final question.
Okay.
Is that okay? Just
yeah, totally. Totally.
See, all these questions, didn't look at it once.
Yeah, of course. Of course. No, they provide the... And I looked again, I just looked at my email just to look. But it's not like I thought, what would I say to this question or what would I say to that question? Go. Okay.
That was one of the questions I was considering for the last one. I was asking you maybe about other dreams you had, or other things that you like very much, but maybe this one. If you look at this list, if you bring this list into mind, was there like one question that you said, oh, that's a nice question, I would like to answer?
That doesn't jump to mind. I mean, I think there wasn't one where I said, wow, yes, let's make sure to talk about that.
Oh.
I think it was just a sense of, okay, I understand what you're trying to do, and I can resonate with that. That feels all fine, and then whatever happens is okay. So I think that's why I wanted the questions, because it told me something about how you were coming into it. So I want to ask you a question.
Of course, you want to
I want to process.
Me too.
Excellent. So I want to sort of hear about your experience or having done this interview together. I mean, you asked the question and I spoke a lot, but
of course,
you created it.
Yes. I think I've found what I was looking for, because I really wanted to understand a little bit of how you were in this as a person, as a traveler. How do you discovered it, how you deal with it, what is really motivating you in this work, and to understand a little bit about the modesty that you have, and kind of the secret, what is, and I think we touched upon, for me it's really what did you add, to what already existed, and I feel that you add like a couple of really essential, beautiful things, and I think I got closer to understanding them and to understand a little bit more also who you are and what.
So what's that like for you?
How's that for me? That's a good question. I think it gives me more security if I'm doing things right or something. There's more.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Well, that's nice.
There's more, which is more important.
Yeah.
It's bigger. I think I will just also wanted just to meet you. That's also very important.
Do you have like a word, or can you name the bigger thing that you started to touch, or you don't want to?
I don't have a word yet.
You don't have a word yet, yeah.
A longing to be in contact.
That's beautiful. By that.
It's much closer to what it is also. Yeah. Still not everything.
Not everything, okay. Yeah, but good, I'm glad. Oh, thank you. It's amazing, but in a way, sort of, I was talking, I think, in a very real way, and
Yes.
it made me feel good, but it really did